Devin and Joanne and Peter and others worked very hard on this budget presentation because people were going to be away. They wanted to make sure that they recorded it very carefully. So I will throw it to Tim to open the meeting. We'll say the pledge and run the video and then open it up for questions. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Julie. I'll call the meeting to order. So please stand.
Flag wave. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have a budget presentation and then we'll handle questions afterwards. So are we ready with the
Are you going to
video?
play?
Yes.
All right. Very professional.
Thank you to everyone in attendance tonight and those watching online. This has been a very different budget year. There's been a lot of media coverage around school budget process. Much of what we hear has focused on statewide totals, statewide averages, or impacts to specific districts that are dealing with some of the most extreme situations. We are not one of those districts. So tonight we want to focus the discussion on Missisquoi Valley School District, what some of those changes mean for us. We want to talk about the challenges that we do have around property value inflation. And we also want to talk about the significant opportunities that we've been given because of the changes in education funding laws. We'll also be showing academic performance data that makes it very clear that MVSD is a district on the rise. And we want to talk about how we can use those opportunities to encourage everyone to stay focused on the long-term goals of our schools and the vital role that our schools play in achieving the long-term goals of our growing community and to keep that positive momentum going. So as we look at the agenda for tonight, as I said, this has not been a normal budget cycle and there's more to address this year than in normal years. So this presentation is a bit longer. I expect it to clock in around 45 minutes. And there are a number of very important topics for us to go through. Despite all the political noise at the state level, we're going to start and end this presentation talking about our community. So we're going to lead off with our community budget input survey, the results that we have there. I've been joined by Joanne Johnston, who is the chair of our Student Success Committee and Finance Committee member. We also have Peter Magnet, who is the chair of our Facilities Committee. And we'll have Rennick Darnell Martin, who is the vice chair of the board and also a member of the Finance Committee. We'll then talk about Act 127, the impacts that the law has on MVSD. And we'll also talk about House Bill 850, which has moved through the House and is in the Senate, and it has proposed language that could change some of the language in Act 127. And if that bill does receive final passage, we expect that to lower the property tax rates further, even with no change in this budget. So we will cover that in quite a bit of detail. We'll then dive into the budget itself. And I know property taxes are on top of mind for many, so we'll try to cover that. I like to try to cover that early in the presentation, and we'll go in depth in that topic. And as we move on, one of the key roles of the board is to ensure that our tax dollars are well spent and that our school district is returning value to our community. So we want to go over our district goals, look at the progress that's been made in those areas. As I said, our district is on the rise, and it's important for us to take the time to talk about where we've been, what's been achieved, and what our next steps are. And finally, we'll end the presentation, again, with a discussion of how this year's budget fits into the long-term goals of our school district and our community. All right, so let's start with the results of the community input survey. We use this survey each year as a check on the board to ensure that the priorities we're setting are in line with the priorities of the community. Here we see the four goals that the board adopted at the beginning of the academic year. primary goal, number 1, is improving the academic performance of our students. This leads to goal number 2, which is improving the post-secondary outcomes of our students. And then goals 3 and 4 are particular areas of focus supporting goals 1 and 2. So we want to compare the priorities identified in our survey to these goals that have been set. So we'll move into those results looking at the areas that the community identified as the top 4 priorities. And so joining me is Joanne Johnston, who will go over the next few slides.
The Community Input Survey. Each year, the board surveys the community to gather input on priorities, and that it helps shape the investment of the board's budget proposal. So this year, over 20% of the respondents were residents without children in the school system, a significant increase in input from those stakeholders. The full survey results can be viewed here and will be posted on our website. Investments in our instructional programs. As we can see, so 86% of the respondents said that investments in instruction is essential or important. Instructional programs for student success. We have added intervention services in reading and math at our elementary schools and at MVU. We have purchased and implemented a new math program that aligns kindergarten through 12. We have implemented professional learning for teachers to support instruction. We have increased tutoring of students who are struggling, and we have improved math results, particularly at the middle school and high school level. So in the proposed budget, we are looking to keep intervention positions and supports to address gaps resulting from COVID. We're looking to add new class offerings to reduce study halls at MVU, looking at adding in social studies, so a full position at MVU. We're looking to adding in teachers for alternative classrooms in Swanton and MVU, the middle school, and also purchase an evidence-based reading program and professional development for teachers. Investments for success after high school. So as we can see here, 86.5% stated tech education, work-based learning are essential and or important. Strategies for student success after high school. So the progress has been, we have added some ag teaching staff and professional learning. We've added ag hours to meet the CTE requirements. We have increased work-based learning experiences, increased access to NCTC for grade 10 students, PLP teacher focused on flexible pathways, aspiration work with VSAC, and software to facilitate WBL pathways, and also after-school experiences for career exploration. In the proposed budget, we are looking to add a half of a full-time business teacher, continued and expanded partnerships with community partners for internships, job shadows, work and career explorations, development of programs to train youth in leadership and employ them in after-school program for younger students. So increase investments to recruit and retain our teachers. And as you can see here with the survey, 85.3% shared that it is essential or important to have competitive pay and benefits. Professional staff recruitment and retention. So our progress, current contract with teachers have meaningful pay increases. Contract with support staff has meaningful pay increases and allow for flexible assignments of staff. Added benefits such as life insurance and dental to all classes of employees, and increased professional development for teachers and support staff. Looking into our new budget for results and possibilities, we have a slight increase in our teachers' retention and continue to monitor and address retention through multiple avenues. We have significantly increased our retention of support staff, and increased tax capacity with the Act 127 may allow further investments and retention in future years.
Good evening. This is Peter Magnet. I'm a member of the Missisquoi Valley School District, and I am currently the chair of the Facilities Committee. So the MVSD school board, along with the administration and director of facilities, has worked hard to improve our facilities, as it's been an important aspect for our school board and our schools, as we know that we want our kids to be in safe environment. And with COVID, we've also learned the importance of air quality in our schools. So we've taken the initiative to do these investments. And you can see from this survey that we took that it's also very important to the people that at least took the survey, but our community is large. As you can see, that over 70% of the survey participants said that, facilities in good working order is obviously essential and very important. So that is why we have invested into the facilities as we have. Some of the projects that we have worked on and are working on include the MVU roof project. We have been putting on a rubberized synthetic material on the roof that has a 20-year warranty. Currently, we have completed C-pod and D-pod, and the A-pod is what we have scheduled to be completed in the summer of 2024. New LED lighting in all schools has been completed. There's a few punch list items that still remain, but overall it has been completed. All our schools are programmed so when you go into a room, if nobody's been into the room for a while, the lights will automatically go off, and they can be programmed to whatever level of dimness or lightness that that room requires. And there is significant savings in energy as well from this project. So this has been a really good project. Highgate has a new HVAC system that covers most of the brick building. This has been a really great project for air quality in the Highgate building, as well as in the warmer weather. It has dehumidification, which has a much higher comfort level in those warmer weather days and through the summer. And also in the in-between days or seasons in the spring and fall, when it's not quite cold enough to really warrant turning on the boilers to heat the system, this new HVAC system keeps it at a comfortable level, so it helps us there as well. You can notice as you go by MVU that we have a new beautiful electronic sign out front. Really adds to the value, I think, of the school, and also great for keeping up with events and things going on at MVU and throughout the district. We are updating air purification in all our buildings. We have units to do that. We are trying to get the HVAC systems updated in all our schools so we can not have to deal with the individual units and the expense of changing those filters out biannually. But until we get there, we are keeping all the buildings clean with fresh air. Expansion of the Franklin Central School, obviously a big project and a great project for Franklin Central School is now they will have preschool. It'll have its own area, a bigger area, no longer have to share that with the music and art program. It will have its own facility. There's also going to be an extra room in that area whenever there is a class that is larger and needs more area. We can split that so they have 2 classrooms now instead of being tied to just that one classroom, as well as all the administrative offices, a new nurses station, which includes a sink and a bathroom, which will be very nice, and other areas as well. We do have the new kitchen hood and fire suppression system in the Highgate building. That's been a while coming. That's something that the state fire warden had mentioned for years now that has been an issue, and we have been able to get that updated. So that's a nice change. We have invested in new kitchen equipment in all of our schools. Just a few to mention. MVU has a new double ovens. It has a steam cooker. an automatic meat slicer, and serving line hot wells. In Swanton, they also have a new double oven, dishwasher, milk coolers, and multiple refrigerators, steam cooker, and cooking range and oven. And also walk-in cooler and freezer condenser and compressors. So lots of nice changes in the food quality in our district. Beginning the process for several years for having new air-conditioned air in the Swanton Elementary School. We're looking at, as you'll see in the next, on the other side, that we're going to be doing that in the Babcock building coming up. So we'll have that HVAC system in there. All our buildings, we're updating the security cameras and building access. All of our buildings now have building access cards to access the building. And in Swanton, we will be putting in new windows in the Babcock building this summer. Things that we have proposed moving forward in Highgate, the brick building roof replacement after many failed repairs. So that's a project that we have put in this year's budget, something that we've been putting off for years, that we finally got to a point where it needs to be replaced. Fire alarm system replacement, another safety issue in Highgate that we are looking to upgrade and replace. New basketball hoops for Highgate, that will be a nice thing for the gymnasium in there. And the white building, we're looking to do a study on the engineering study on that building to see where we need to go with that building as far as whether it's worth putting more money into it or if there's other avenues that we can use to create space for the Highgate. In Swanton, the Babcock roof replacement is on the budget, as well as the central roof valley repair in the brick building. Stormwater system upgrade, we have a grant for that. We have a local match that we need to do. And the PA system in Swanton is in bad need of repair, so we also have that in the budget for repairing. At MVU, we've got the parking lot resurfacing phase 1. That goes hand in hand with the parking lot lighting improvements. So anyone that's been in the MVU parking lot realizes the need for several years now to replace that surface. And as a safety thing, if you've ever been in the parking lot at night, there is not enough lighting for being able to get to your vehicles. So that is also in the budget to be upgraded. And again, we have a stormwater system upgrade grant at MVU as well, and we have a local match for that. We also have the wood chip boiler controls. We're putting in new controls. We have a grant for that. So we have a local match required for that. The wood chip boiler is our backup system, but a backup system isn't very good if we don't have the controls to operate it when the system is down. That's why we're investing in that. Roof replacement phase 2. I mentioned in the previous section that we have been doing one pod a year, and this year pod A that is going to be replaced this year. Actually, yes, pod A. So then that brings us to field hockey. They do not currently have a scoreboard, so we wanted to put that in our budget, and EEI found out that we needed that, and they offered to donate that to us. So we're very appreciative for that. And then as far as the athletic fields, we've been trying to look at ways to improve our fields. We need water to get the grass to grow, so we're looking at repairing our wells so we can be able to do that, so we can put new seed down and get our fields in working order. And also we want to change the parking and improve the parking improvements there. So that is all in MVU for upgrades. And in Franklin, we did talk about the expansion going on there. We're also looking at putting in new security cameras.
All right, so before we dive into the details of the budget, we do want to cover the glossary of terms here, a few things that are specific to school budgeting. take a minute, let you read over some of those. A couple that I do want to call out that we'll talk about a bit. First one is education spending. This is the total expenditure budget minus any revenues that the school gets. Some of those revenues would include grant funding, state reimbursement of special education costs, and a few others. So education spending is the net of our expenditures and our revenue. The second one I want to talk about is the property dollar yield. This number is not yet set, and this one has a significant impact on setting our final tax rate. The legislature sets this, and this is a number that's still potentially moving based on the laws that are being considered by the legislature. So we're presenting the information here using really what we view as a worst case scenario. We'll talk about some of the possible beneficial impacts of the new law that amends Act 127 that's currently progressing through the legislature. So I did struggle a bit on where to insert the section on legislative action. I typically like to rush to the budget information and the tax rate, which I know is on everyone's mind. Unfortunately, those sections make reference to Act 127 and to the current proposal to amend Act 127. So I think we need to go through this section first. So Rennick will take us through this section.
The purpose of Act 127 is to improve equity across the state of Vermont. You'll see later in the slide that our tax calculation used a new metric as a measure of student attendance. This new measure provides additional counts for students that require higher levels of resources to support their learning. Some examples of students that are counted with a higher weighting are students living in rural areas, those living in poverty, and English language learners. This legislation is highly beneficial to MVSD. You will see later that this legislation allows us to draw down a larger slice of the state educational fund pie for the same level of tax contributions. As we record this, a bill is working its way through the Vermont legislature to amend Act 127, something that you may have heard of in the news. This was after it was realized that original provisions created incentives for unexpectedly high school spending across the state. Passage of this amendment could increase rates for those districts where the board approved budgets that are well over that 5% cap. MVSD is not one of those districts. The potential removal of the 5% growth cap to equalized homestead property tax rates would have almost no impact on our equalized tax rates. We do, however, stand to benefit from the potential increase in the yield that is likely to occur if the growth cap is removed. In other words, we're in a really good position. That's because with the new formula, districts that had very high growth would now pay more into the state educational fund than they would have with the cap in place. That additional revenue in the educational fund would then be used to offset tax rates in all the districts across the states, and that is done by increasing the yield. The proposed bill allows districts to cancel their budget on voting town meeting day and work to adopt a revised budget to propose to voters at a later date. This is designed for those districts that are significantly impacted by the removal of the cap, to the point where their boards no longer support the originally approved budget. Again, MVSD is not one of those districts. We did review our options and held a vote to postpone the budget. The MVSD board continues to support this budget as approved and recommended to the voters. As we work through the next few sections, you will see that we use what we consider to be the worst case scenario for our equalized homestead tax rate. We really stopped trying to predict where the yield will end up and focused on funding the district priorities and doing so in a way that positions us to benefit from any future changes to the law. What do I mean by that? A few possible yield values have been mentioned by the Agency of Education and in various legislation committee meetings, and in meetings for the school business managers over the last few weeks while H 850 is being considered. This chart shows the impact of some of those scenarios. I hate to make predictions around the legislator's process, but my instinct is that some version of H 850 will be signed into law and it will reduce our tax rates compared to what is presented today.
All right, and now we'll jump into the budget information and tax rate estimates. Okay, so here is a summary of our fiscal year 2025 budget. And this is where we start to see some of the advantageous outcomes of Act 127. And what I want to make clear is that because of the changes to education funding in Act 127, and because MVSD is a growing district with a substantial population of low-income families, we are able to take a larger piece of the education fund pie, which shows up here as a large increase in expenditures, without a proportional increase in our tax rate. Our net education spending is up by 18%, with an increase of only 4.3% to our net spending per long-term weighted average daily membership, which is a long way of saying per pupil. And this results in a 5% increase in our equalized tax rate. This is how Act 127 was designed to improve equity. The goal is for districts like ours to increase our investments that promote student success and that provide safe, well-maintained facilities for our students and for our community. And this is a one-time opportunity. We'll not have the opportunity to capture this level of resources with this limited impact to our tax rates in the future. So how are we investing the additional tax capacity? The focuses of our investments are in student instruction to promote improved student outcomes and in facilities maintenance, in alignment with our community priorities and district goals. Increases in the other categories are primarily routine inflation, with transportation standing out here, which only about 20% of that would be standard inflation on our busing contract. The rest, we're seeing large increases in our alternative transportation, which is alternative placements, out-of-district placements, taxi services for our homeless population, or any other alternative transportation needs that some students require. So Peter has already touched on the facilities projects that are planned, and we did want to present the detailed list here for transparency. We have many significant projects that need to be done to avoid more costly repairs or replacements in the future. We're proposing a list of really what are simple maintenance items and some critical infrastructure projects, like the roof and paving projects at MVU, along with the roof project in Highgate and air handling project at the Babcock Building in Swanton. There are no frills on this list. It's simply the maintenance that we need to take on as a community to keep our facilities in good repair. We know that voters in Swanton are dealing with challenges around public buildings there. This board has no part in that discussion and has no opinion, but what we have been doing, however, is listening. What we've heard loud and clear is that our community would prefer to make smaller investments in our municipal buildings each year and avoid large replacement projects and avoid the cost of issuing bonds and avoid the additional cost of interest on bonds. This budget proposes just that. Committing to a strategy of routine replacement and repair requires a portion of the budget each year to be allocated to these projects. To those who have spoken out against other building projects and against bonding for municipal building repair and replacement, I hope you'll see that this budget is what you've been asking for. This is what it looks like to take the alternative route, and I hope that we'll have your support. Now we present a breakdown on the changes to staffing throughout the district. In total, we're expecting a decrease of approximately 8 FTEs, full-time equivalents. But this is not all a cost savings. Some of these, including speech and language pathologists and behavior management positions, are being filled through contracts with outside agencies that are more expensive than hiring those positions directly. There are very few programmatic changes included in this budget compared to the current year. One change that I want to highlight is the alternative classroom program that Joanne had mentioned earlier in the presentation. This increases a teacher position at MVU in Swanton. And this program is designed to accommodate those students who are able to find more success outside the traditional classroom setting, but do not require the higher level services of an out-of-district placement. It will allow for more flexible movement between this setting and the traditional classrooms for those that may only need the change for a period of time. We expect that this will reduce the need for some out-of-district placements in the future, This is expected to keep costs down in the long run, as out-of-district placements are very expensive. And more importantly, this will be a valuable support for the small group of students who will need to utilize it. We can see that revenues are down slightly going into FY25. The top row, fund balance, is the carryover from the fiscal year 2023 budget, which is applied to fiscal year 25 to buy down our tax rates. Whenever we end a school year under budget, those funds are used to offset tax rates in future years. That's how that money is returned back to the taxpayers. We do see a big decline in our federal grants. Nearly all of this is the expiration of the final year of the federal pandemic support, often referred to as ESSER. And then we do have a large increase in our special education reimbursement. And this is the result of Vermont adopting a new formula for reimbursing special education costs, and it's increased MVSD's reimbursement. Adding some more notes around the increases that we saw in the pie chart a few moments ago, the additional $2.5 million in instruction and student support has over $1 million related to increased insurance costs. This is health insurance for our employees, workers' compensation insurance, and unemployment insurance. These costs are negotiated at the state level and passed to individual school districts. We also saw the $400,000 in net wage increases a couple slides ago. And then, as mentioned before, the transition of some positions from district employees to contract services adds over $500,000. And then we also saw the list of our infrastructure projects. Now, let's dive into the tax rate. Here we see the calculation of the estimated equalized homestead tax rate. This tax rate is the same for Swanton, Highgate, and Franklin. This tax rate is calculated by dividing the education spending amount by the long-term average weighted daily membership. Again, think number of students. The result is $12,367 in this proposed budget. The tax rate, the equalized homestead tax rate, is then calculated by dividing this number by the property dollar yield. And this is the number that could be revised if H850 passes. Wherever you see these numbers through the rest of the presentation, think this is where we stand now, and we have good reason to believe that they will change in our favor before it's all done. Here we see the history of our equalized homestead tax rate going back to the first year post-merger and the creation of Missisquoi Valley School District in fiscal year 2020. We are still substantially below the fiscal year 2020 rate. So, if that's the case, why are our tax bills so much higher today than they were back then? This is a result of the common level of appraisal. So each year the state looks at property sale information by town, and they analyze the difference in a percentage between the sales price and the listed value of those properties. They look at that average difference between sale price and listed value, and then they take the listed value of every property in the town and adjust it by that percentage. So imagine for a moment that all houses in Highgate are listed at $100,000 with the town. And imagine everyone that sold for $110,000, 10% premium. Then the state adjusts the common level of appraisal such that all the houses in Highgate that are listed at $100,000 are taxed as though they are worth $110,000. If a new home is built, and imagine that this new home is listed at $200,000, then that 10% premium from the common level of appraisal would cause that house to have a taxable value of $220,000. So if we look back in time to fiscal year 2020, the first year that we had our merged district, we can see that houses with a taxable value of $100,000 in all three towns actually had a listed value over $100,000. So at that time, our houses were selling on average for slightly less than what the town had them appraised at. Since then, property values have grown substantially and reappraisals have not been done. And those same houses that were taxed at $100,000 of value in fiscal year 2020 are now taxed at values between $130,000 and $140,000. Even though our equalized homestead tax rate has come down, the taxable value of our homes has gone up at a much faster rate. Here we break down the impact of the two components over the past 5 years. The equalized tax rate is calculated from the school budget and is the same for all three towns and has gone down by 9.2% in that time. The only thing causing our tax rate changes to be different in each of the three towns is the difference in the annual changes to the common level of appraisal. And you can see that that increase in the common level of appraisal has more than offset the decrease in the equalized homestead tax rate. So what does this look like for fiscal year 25? Here's the hard truth. In all three towns, regardless of the school district budget, our taxes are going up substantially. This is driven by the large adjustments to the CLA in each town. We've chosen to present the tax impact under the worst case scenario, as I mentioned before. The worst case scenario is where the revisions of Act 127 are not passed, resulting in the use of the property dollar yield that was announced in December of 9,452. And this is where you can look at these numbers as the top end of the range and reduce them by about 5% and view that as the bottom end of the range. Let's look at those rates in terms of real dollars. In all three towns, the impact of the school budget is the small piece of the pie. This is why I said earlier that the hard truth is that our taxes are going up regardless of what we do with this budget. We're voting on the blue slice. We don't get to vote on the orange slice. Those increases are coming no matter how we vote on this or any other budget proposal. We need help from the state government in addressing the housing crisis in Vermont that's driving up prices. We have some community members who feel the pain of our housing crisis because they can't find affordable housing. And we have other members who do have housing who also feel the pain of skyrocketing property taxes. This is much bigger than our school budget and can't be addressed through school spending alone. But you may say that we can still affect a portion of that, and this is true. This slide quantifies the impact that a change in budgeted expenditures has on tax rates. And you can see it's relatively small. A $1 million reduction in net education spending will remove $29 from the annual tax bill of that house with a taxable value of $100,000. That's it. So we have to ask ourselves, is the tax benefit of removing a large item, such as a roof or pavement project, worth such a small level of tax relief compared with the need for keeping up with maintenance and avoiding more costly replacement and potentially bonds in the future? This is the really tough part of presenting this budget. It's been the really tough part of considering the budget. Board members have been working through this budget for the past 2 months, knowing that the common level of appraisal is hitting us really hard this year. We also know that this is the only year we can capitalize on the one-time change in student weights, and that it's our responsibility to our community to draw down our larger piece of the pie from the education fund under Act 127 to bring an equitable amount of resources to our three towns. We also know that our district has substantial infrastructure needs, and that postponing our addressing of these needs can only make a small difference in our taxes. In my opinion, this boils down to one question. Do we want high taxes with our infrastructure projects adequately funded? Or do we want high taxes without our infrastructure projects adequately funded? All right, while we let that part of the presentation settle, I do want to shift gears a bit. I've just laid out a big ask, and with that big ask, we need to show everyone what those tax dollars are doing. A key responsibility of the board is to ensure that the public funds are being used wisely and that our school district is delivering the results that we expect when we invest those funds. So now I'll call back to our district goals back at the beginning of the presentation. Goal number 1, the most important of all, is that we want to see improvement in student achievement. And it's no secret, MVU performance in math and English and language arts has struggled over the years. The board, the administration, and staff have concentrated on this goal over the course of multiple years, and we're excited to show the most recent results. Proficiency rates in math have doubled since 2021. This is an incredible achievement that's taken an enormous amount of effort from so many people, including the ongoing support of our community. English and language arts performance has similarly increased, and we're looking forward to the opportunity for further improvement as the administrative team implements a comprehensive reading program that follows the same K-12 strategic philosophy that has produced such great results in math. So these improvements look great, But how do they stack up against other Vermont school districts? Since we became a single pre-K to grade 12 district, the board has been talking about academic excellence. And over the past 4 years, we've asked the administration for incremental improvement each year, just a little better each year. And at the same time, the board has targeted meeting the state average proficiency marks as a first milestone in the journey towards excellence. And as we look at 2023 data for both math and English and language arts, we can see that we have met that first milestone. Math scores have really popped, and English and language arts is next on the list. Even before we bring on comprehensive ELA program to mirror math, we've reached the statewide average. We've hit the first milestones, and I hope we can all take a moment to appreciate the hard work that's gone into the process and celebrate the success of the kids who are part of it. MVU is also a place with incredible opportunities. Here's a simple list of achievements and extracurricular experiences that are happening at MVU in a wide variety of disciplines. We've had students get involved with community advocacy. We've had our students in our FFA program travel to the national conference in Indianapolis and return with a bronze medal in equine evaluation. We've had athletic achievements with a Heisman High School Athlete Award winner and a recent divisional championship from our cheerleading team. We have academic opportunities to participate in the STEM fair and financial literacy. And we were recently recognized by the Governor's Council for Fitness, selected as one of only 2 middle schools in the state of Vermont to receive a $100,000 grant for our fitness center. And our MVU students who participate in drama, music, and the arts programs have an opportunity to travel to New York City this spring to visit museums and musicals and have a great cultural experience there. Let's also look at teacher retention rates. Keeping our teachers here is so important for student success. We started measuring these rates back in 2023. We have 2 years of data along with our goal for fiscal year 2025. We should be really proud that professional teachers are choosing to work in MVSD and that each year they're choosing to return to work at MVSD. I don't believe that it is an accident that retention rates are rising at the same time as student achievement. They feed into each other. As our teachers refine their craft and grow their experience, our students are benefiting. And as our student outcomes grow, our teachers are seeing the fruits of their labor. We've talked already about the compensation strategy that the board has employed to impact this measure. But I'll repeat a phrase I use all the time on this topic. It's just fun to be on a winning team. And right now, we have a winning team. While so much of our staff is focused on improving the learning of students, many people are behind the scenes ensuring that the community buildings are maintained to provide a safe and reliable learning environment and to ensure proper stewardship of our community resources. We've included some photos here of the facilities projects that have been completed over the past few years. Clean and vibrant facilities should be a source of pride for our community. We've reached the end of the presentation. And just as we started the presentation talking about community, I'm going to end talking about community. We're experiencing significant growing pains as a result of Act 127 and the speculation around changes to Act 127, while also dealing with the challenges of rising property values and a lack of affordable housing all across Vermont. In this whirlwind of uncertainty, we're also facing some incredible opportunities. Missisquoi Valley School District is a district on the rise. While things swirl around us this year, I ask that we stay focused on the long-term goals of our district and our community, that we stay focused on the parts we can control. We're asking all of you to support a budget that continues our investment in the priorities that so many of us share. We're also asking that you support this budget in a year that rising property values will test our commitment to those priorities. As we look to the future, we know significant development is planned in our community, especially in Highgate around the Franklin County Airport. In the years ahead, we have the opportunity to lower our tax rates by bringing more families into our district. As more jobs come to our community and more workers choose where to live, we know that school systems drive that choice for families. We have an incredible amount of momentum here in MVSD, and we ask that all of us come together to keep that momentum going. Please help us by supporting this budget.
Okay. Thank you, I guess, to Devin for putting that together, and to the board. And I guess we're gonna open up to questions. I will ask it all questions. I'm moderating this, so all questions be asked to me, and I'll search the answers from the board for you. So I open up questions now. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Mr. Moderator, can you tell me who other board members are on Zoom currently? Other than, I can see Toby, but I don't know.
Just Toby.
Just Toby.
Actually, maybe we ought to start before that even. Maybe we should introduce the board members that are here. We have Toby online. Start here with, to my right.
I'm Megan Conley. I'm the one of the 3 representatives from Swine.
Joanne Johnston, I represent Franklin.
Peter Magnet, I represent Franklin.
And Don Collins, Swanton, and Toby McGuire, I think you mentioned, is with us by Eiffel. Right?
And he also represents Swine.
Laura, the rest of you.
And Julie Redenbaugh, superintendent.
Laura McAllister, Director of Finance and Operations.
And our
This is Philip Buchanan, who works in our tech department. It's keeping us moving.
What's his title?
He is in the tech department.
Title of?
Philip,
technical department.
I'm tech support.
tech support.
Okay.
And I'm Tim Maggie, your
Pop quiz,
moderator.
Ty, I'm sorry.
And I will ask that you state your name if you ask the question, please.
Ty Sawyer, Highgate.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? After all that, did the, don't answer all the questions? Yvonne.
Yvonne Dandran, Town of Franklin. Question on the ESSER dollars. I think the word ESSER is slightly going away, but the ESSER dollars that we're supporting X amount of programs, are all of those programs going to continue to be supported now that the ESSER dollars are evaporated?
Well, we planned for that. So we only had a handful of positions that were in the budget all along, and they were reflected in the expense budget all these years. And we were offsetting them with different revenue when we knew that the ESSER money was going away. For example, we have a social worker here at MVU. She works with a large number of students. That position was planned to be kept all along. There are some other smaller things, extra camps, extra tutoring, extra things that are stopping. But the handful of interventionists and there's a social worker, they're staying. And they're covered through the expanded tax capacity and other revenue that we have, Medicaid dollars, et cetera.
I think the board early on with ESSER monies, when we started hearing about them, I think many of the board members and our superintendent, business manager, understand that when you get state and federal money, usually it dries up, and this one did. So I think what you'll see is, unlike some school districts that went out and hired a lot more people, we put it into facilities. And your Franklin School's a good advantage. If we'd taken that, what, $4 million, and we had said, well, we're gonna hire 20 more people, we'd be in serious trouble today. Could we use more people? Sure, everybody said they could use more people, but we didn't do it. We don't plan to build another new school or addition in Franklin or any other town at this point in time. So that was a wise investment. Put the money in a one-time thing. And we made a lot of those decisions.
Thank you, Don. Any other questions? Yes.
Brandy Maskell from Highgate. I was curious why there's been such the push for outside contractors. I know specifically SLPs are hard to find, but I'm curious why we're focused on those outside counselors as opposed, or outside contractors as opposed to offering incentives for them to become MVSD employees. I know there's a lot of fees that come with SLPs, but I would feel like offering some help with covering those might be more cost beneficial than paying a lot more money for people that don't even come into our buildings sometimes.
I would love to do that, and that is our intention from year to year. We post year round. We search more than just the usual school spring. we cannot find enough SLPs locally in Vermont or New York or New Hampshire to be in person. So we have had to use national service providers that do cost more. It is in the budget, and we will not spend the dollars on a contract if we can hire our own employees. We do pay for their dues. We do as much as we can to compensate them as high a rate as we can, given our master agreement. And we always want our own employees. But the reality is, it's a shortage area in the state.
Is the compensating the dues, is that new?
Nope, since I've been here, I've done that.
Mr. Moderator, may I speak to that issue?
Yes.
Now, I'm not talking about speech, but I want to talk about something else. And Mr. Hartman's here, and he can back up what I say or tell me I'm not telling you the truth. But I was on the MVU board for many years. Because our salaries for maintenance and custodial people wasn't competitive with the area, we went to contracted services. I don't know how many years we did contracted services. But in the last couple of negotiations, salaries have moved up some, and I do not believe we have any contracted service custodians at this time. They're all local employees. That didn't happen overnight, and neither model, I can't say maybe that quality people didn't do the job, because I think they did, and I think the administration made sure they did. But there's some advantage to having someone on your payroll that lives in the local area.
Absolutely.
And we have arrived there, and I would say it probably took us 3 or 4 years.
Thank you. I saw another question over here.
She took my question. That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Okay.
Can I?
Let's somebody that has it, yes.
James Sullivan, Highgate. You talked about resurfacing parking lot. There was talk of putting a sewer line from the ag building and putting a new sewer line from the ag, because our barn right now has no sewer line from the barn, so there was talk 2-3 years ago of sewer line. Is that something that's still in the works before we resurface the parking lot and then decide to put this sewer line in and tear it all up?
I'll say that that's being considered, but there is, the ag leadership team is very much looking at the priorities of the ag program and the curriculum that's needed and what programs are going to be running in that area of the facility, while they're determining if that line is necessary or other investments need to be made. So yes, it's on the radar if it's necessary for the programming that's going to happen.
Just because there was talk, we want to expand the barn, and there was talk for the last 5 or 6 years of a new sugar house / classroom space. So the sewer line is something that would be needed for those things.
We aren't going to pay to tear it up.
I know that's something that Jason is looking at, so.
It's on our capital plan.
Yeah.
It's being decided.
And I'm guessing, Jim, Mr. Moderator, if I speak to you, but the question about that, I think we've discussed it enough that you won't see it paved 1 year and dug up the next year. We'll make sure it goes the proper sequence.
Thank you, Don. Thank you. Any other questions? I saw some interest here. Go ahead.
Ryan Maskell from Highgate. Who is currently on the facilities committee board? I mentioned
Don and I are both on.
And Rennick from Highgate.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Rennick Darnell Martin from Highgate also.
Totally required, but Peter and I either have a love for it, or I don't know why, but we seem to spend a lot of our time doing facilities. But we have an excellent coordinator of facilities throughout the district, and Franklin has its own, but we do have coordination, Mr. Moderator, with all of them.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Okay. It was more of what would you say how you're prioritizing projects, repairs, if you will?
So we've got, Mr. Moderator, we have a list, and we've had like projects that are priority this year. We know that projects are going to be priority 3 to 4 years down the road. We have projects 5 to 10 years down the road. And what we've noticed is, over the years, those projects that are a year or two down the road keep getting pushed out. And it makes it more expensive, and we need to start bringing those in, and that's what you're seeing this year. We've put off the paving for a long time. It really needs to be done. The Highgate roof is another good example. That's been leaking, we've been trying to patch it. It's just a lot of things that are coming due. But we have a much, over the last, I'd say 3 or 4, 5 years, at least since the board started the facilities committee, we have really taken aggressive approach at trying to make sure that we're getting these projects done before they get out of hand.
I would just add that health and safety is number one. That's also in the law in the state of Vermont, that the new kind of some new law that's in place as far as facilities upkeep is that health and safety has to be the number one priority, as it should be. But that's something that we talk about all the time. It's just why we're investing in HVAC and things like that, clean air.
The HVAC has been really big, and our teachers have really given us a lot of feedback of how appreciative they are of us investing in that. And I know that parents and teachers are both, you know, obviously we want to keep our students and teachers as healthy as possible.
Over here.
So the increase of $6 million from last year, correct? We're going from 44 to 50. How much of that is for these projects, and how much is increase in teacher salary and insurance?
It's up to,
I can just tell you what's for facilities very easily, if that's helpful.
so there's over half of it.
Sorry, the lighting is bad. Yeah, the facility line increase is 2.3 million.
And then the other 4 is teacher salaries.
Salaries,
Not all.
salaries, transportation, inflation, transportation, I could say transportation about 4 more times. But
Contracted
it's
services.
contracted services.
Mr. Moderator, may I speak?
Yes, no.
I think you've heard it here tonight, but I want to repeat it. For many years, teachers and school board members negotiated. They negotiated salaries, they negotiated benefits. Oh, maybe, I left the legislature about 8 years ago, so it started a little before I left. Somebody got the wise idea that if the state said to purchase the health insurance, it's going to save money. So they put together a committee representing all unionized employees at the state level, and a committee that had people from school boards and other walks of life. And they've worked together to negotiate. It has been an absolute mess, a chaos, disagreement, wasted time, and we're paying more for health insurance now. This is not the fault of our employees. This is a fault of the way the state handled the whole setup. So now when we go to bargain with our non-teaching staff and our teaching staff, we used to be able to say, yes, we hear you. You want maybe some other benefit, maybe you want more salary. And we have only so much money. So if you're going to get better health insurance, you're going to get less salary. If you're going to get more salary, then we're going to have to cut back on your benefits. Now we don't have that bargaining chip. The state took away that. So, you know, we have to sit here and live with it. Wonderful thing in my life, I've been in the legislature, and I know how good decisions are made and not good decisions are made. And that was not a good decision. And it's not the fault of the school board or the teachers or the other people here. We got stuck with it. And there's no savings in health insurance. If anything, it's one of the higher years we've had in a long time.
Almost 16%
Yeah,
increase in
almost
health insurance
17%
that we don't control.
increase.
We used to think 10 was outlandish. So the state took over and we're 17 or 18%.
Maybe not. Questions? Have we had any questions from the?
I have not seen
I
it.
think there's been a couple comments, actually.
Emma Gerard commented about the SLP services, if there aren't enough services to be hired in the school, so she's saying what I said. And then Yeshua made a comment about the quality of the presentation.
Yvonne.
Yvonne Dan Rantown of Franklin. There was a slide earlier that mentioned an increase in staff retention. What is the contribution to that? Or what is contributing to that?
Go ahead, Julie.
I think that we have worked hard to be competitive with our salaries and benefits, not just salaries, but also we added life insurance and dental insurance to some groups of employees that did not have that. We are doing exit interviews with our teachers. We are doing roundtables with our teachers. We are asking for their input and what is working for them and what they would like to see change. Teaching is a hard job. It's always been a hard job. And, you know, I'm not looking at you. It gets harder in the past several years. We always will have, there's also a culture with younger teachers. They come up, they go to school here, they get their first teaching job here, and then they move back home or they move somewhere else. There's a lot more mobility, so we have some of that. And then, of course, we have a lot of veteran teachers that are choosing to retire. Some of that has slowed down, and we're working really hard to retain our teachers and support them. So it's not one thing. We're trying to address it in many ways.
Pete,
And just kind of add on to what Julie said, I think it's great to see that we're getting more retention with the difficulties that Julie talked about. But another thing that the board has looked at and have been really happy about is we've had a lot of alumni, kids that went through this system that have come back to teach here. Mm-hmm. And those are great because they're more likely to stay because they're more invested in our communities. So we've been really pleased by that a lot of alumni from MVU or in our towns are coming back to work here.
Maybe you want to add to that?
Yeah, just another piece of the puzzle is, as Devin alluded to in the presentation, we have focused really strategically on increasing our students' success and their performance. And as he said, you know, when you're on the winning team, it feels good. And so as we continue to see those improvements in our students' performance, the teachers are going to feel more and more invested in their classrooms. So I think that is also just a positive side effect of the investments and focus we've been putting on student success.
I know I'm talking a lot, but I like the questions and I want to throw out some things. And I never would have thought of this had I not been lucky enough to be working with state colleges as a trustee. But about 10 years ago, or maybe a little longer, the state colleges decided that education wasn't very glamorous. Trained teachers wasn't very glamorous. Let's get into some of the things like maybe creative artistry. I'm not against artists. Let's expand and maybe do more recreation and other types of courses for people for those jobs. And when I was a trustee, I said, well, what studies have we done to find out if there are jobs there? Well, we've heard. Well, guess what? There's a teacher shortage. So when we think we're trying to retain teachers, we're up against a pool that's much smaller than it was a decade ago.
Yes.
Because students looked at these things and go, well, I want to be a teacher when I can do this and maybe go to New York City and make big money. And a lot of those programs now have failed, and that's why the state colleges in particular are in serious trouble. I mean, if you followed it, I think in the last 2 or 3 years, a number of times they've closed some of the colleges because they don't have the enrollments. And part of it was they weren't training teachers because they didn't figure that that was the way to go. It wasn't the ways of the future. Well, some bad decisions were made and people lost their jobs.
Reality's world.
Yeah, one more question.
Go ahead, Eva.
Go ahead.
Well, I got 2 things. I just wanted to add with the local thing. Our 5 ag teachers are all local. Highgate and Franklin. And yes, they're returning students. So I am very proud of that. They are local, seeing that we are an ag community, so they will know what is expected and should be done with our students. The other thing is, when I look through the budget, and I see money budgeted for X of certain things, and it's just a number, say 100,000, but only 26,000 was spent. Do you look at them numbers and, because I go over to the budget where it says for 25, and then there's an increase in that 100,000, but we didn't even spend the 100,000 this year and last year.
You want me to answer that?
Go ahead.
All right. Well, there's a couple of things that come into play there. One is that currently the anticipated for the current year, that those numbers were, they're January numbers, and there's still 5 or 6 months left of school at that point. So we do our best that we can to estimate what the spending will be through the end of the year, but obviously there's lines that we just can't predict. There's supplies and things like that that need to be purchased. So some of that comes into play. Also, a few years ago, the state implemented a uniform chart of accounts, meaning the accounting lines that we use, there's about almost 4,000 of them actually that we are required to use. They now are requiring those to be used statewide, and so when we merged, our schools weren't necessarily charging things completely the same, right? Like, so some might charge a book to one line, but they might charge a piece of equipment at a certain size to another line. We have, over the course of the last 4 years, utilized the uniform chart of accounts and the merger and all of our school districts coming together to make our standards. So some of what you're seeing in the fluctuation is us applying the uniform chart of accounts. So it might look like one line went up, but another one went down to 20,000. It's because we're now charging things consistently across all of our schools following the chart of accounts. So a lot of those that you see it's actually a shift from one line to another. For instance, in this budget, you'll notice a really big shift if you're looking through the budget that's in the book of HRA expenses. So our healthcare, one of our healthcare benefits that we're required to provide is an HRA for all of our staff. And we now charge those all consistently for MVSD under the central office. So when you look under the central office fund in here, it'll look like it went up $800,000. If you look, the reason for that is HRA, and across all the other HRA lines in previous years, those now are zeroed out. So it's shifts like that are happening. I think we're about at the end of that since the merger and then the pandemic and then the uniform chart of accounts, like all of that coming into play. I think now, about 4 years later, we're just about at a point where we should stop shifting things around. We've actually applied it, but a lot of it is that too.
Just one last question for me on a very different topic. What are we doing, if anything, about the security of our children and staff in the schools?
Julie?
So we have, as always, we've had an SRO in this building. We have access controls in all of our buildings, so you can't just walk in. And that includes central office because the law changed to include that. We have a safety team that meets several times a year with law enforcement to make sure that we are all using the same standard response protocols and that we are communicating what those are and that we have communication processes and response processes in case of an emergency. And unfortunately, we use those more and more, thank goodness, not for anything that has actually happened, but threats and false threats that have occurred over time. We have security cameras in place. We have other systems in place as well. We actually this fall feels like a million years ago, we had a FEMA training that had Swanton law enforcement, it had Border Patrol, it had state police, it had local officials, it had school principals and leadership and other behavioral and safety staff all here learning about safety and response protocols.
Peter?
So, Yvonne, that was a very important issue for the board as well. Last year, we reviewed with each school what their policies were. Obviously, we couldn't do that in open session, but we, reviewed. So each school has a plan what to do under duress of shooting or fire, whatever it is, the emergency. They have guidelines, protocols, what they need to do and where they need to go. So it was reassuring, I think, to the board to review that with all the schools so that we know that there is a plan if something happens.
And I think the new Franklin building, as well as when we did the MVU bond, we have upgraded tremendously, probably high quality compared to other schools, because we were doing the job to do it right.
Thank you, Peter. You have a question over here?
A few years ago, Highgate had invested in like a secondary measure to secure classroom doors. The fire marshal has slapped our hand and said we can no longer do that. I was wondering if there has been, if you guys have looked into any more about kind of updating what we currently have. I know so far just this year, I have put in 6 maintenance tickets because the lock on my door gets stuck inside, so it doesn't even latch. So because they've removed all of those secondary closures, I have no way of securing my door. So just curious if there's been.
Interior and exterior doors are part of now the last few years we've tried to increase the maintenance budget across all of the schools, so we're trying to address as many interior and exterior doors as we can in each school as part of maintenance. So maybe it's 2 in Highgate a year and 5 at MVU and 6 in Swanton, and then it's also on our capital plan on a larger level to make bigger investments as we can. I can tell you though that doors are, I've learned over the last 2 years, and I'm sure Peter has too, are extremely complicated, and the pricing is out of control for interior and exterior doors for school systems right now. But yes, it's talked about almost weekly with Jason and myself at least, and the facility committee also. Yeah.
Hopefully if you work in our district, you don't have to put in more maintenance tickets.
I do. I've put in 6 just this year.
Laura spoke about it being law that we require it in the budget, life safety is first. See your budget that has a new roof on Highgate. I would say preventing an active shooter for interior doors would be above a roof. To replace all doors if they needed to be replaced, not over a ton. That's just
not the roof is leaking.
The roof's been leaking for 12 years now. I think we've tried to invest in it, but it is creating a hazard.
And we'll take care of the doors.
Yes.
Just a comment. Remember, our ag is separate from the school. So our children have to walk across to the thing. So when it comes to security, I'm hoping the school is on top of it because we have students walking back and forth. Do we have 1 or 2 officers?
We have 1.
So does he actually go outside when students are walking through?
Well, we have safety plans that we don't talk about publicly, but yes, we have plans that include our students that are on and off campus.
Thank you, Julie.
I know I hit on the ag, just so I'm on the ag advisory committee, so that's why the ag is one of my top priorities. Just so everybody is like, why just got ag? Thank you.
Yes.
You showed a chart
Could you
of,
state your name? I haven't.
oh, I'm sorry, Dee Krasinski from Swan,
Okay, thank you.
of the results of the math and the increase compared to Vermont numbers, I believe.
Yes.
How do those compare to the national numbers?
Oh, it's not a national test.
Okay.
So this year we have the Vermont, I don't know what the acronym stands for, that's, I apologize, the VTAP assessment. And we're the only state that's using it. When we have other assessments that we take, the NAEP is an assessment that's taken across the whole state. Some of our students are taking that this year, and we get the results of those, and that's where you can compare nationally. But our state English language arts and math scores were pretty much at or above state level in most grade levels, and we were pleased with that. We've been working really hard looking at our instruction and the materials available to teachers and the professional development we've given to teachers, and our kids are working very hard. So we are finally starting to see some movement and turning the ship in the right direction. Peter?
Thank you, Jill. Yes.
I would also add, I'm a member of the Student Success Committee, and we have made it a priority to also look at the effects that COVID has had on groups of students, depending on their grade level. So you can see, there are distinct dips, right? And we are, as a success committee and the board at large, are really focusing on those groups as well, so that we don't just continue to see these drops, that we are supporting them in the ways that we can to build back what they lost during those years. Our current fourth graders, they were in kindergarten when COVID hit and it went remote, then they had hybrid. Those are really key learning times for our students, so we are actively addressing those as well.
Thank you. Don?
Mr. Moderator, may I speak to the lady's question? It was a very good question, and I don't remember having anybody ask that in the last 10, 20 years. But if you go back to 30, 40 years ago, we did standardized tests. They were national, Metropolitan, Stanford. And even though it was hard to pull the data out because of inner city schools and who reported, who did it. I think in the last decade, Vermont has changed their tests 3 times through the Agency of Education. What was the?
We had
Greater balance.
VCAP, and then we had Smarter Balance, and now we have the VTCAP. That's just
Smarter
been...
balance is supposed to be better than any sliced bread you could ever see to find out how smart your kids were. And before we got the data longitudinally so you could see how you compared, they said, oh no, we gotta get something better.
I think, my hope is that the state sticks with the same assessment for a period of time. We don't rely on that assessment. We have to do it for the federal government, and it's a snapshot. But what we do is our teachers give assessments of reading and math that are standardized, that are quick, and we look at that data several times a year, and we say, oh, 4th grade is having a really hard time. Let's put extra intervention in place. Let's use these different modules in math that we can help pump them up a little bit. We've been doing that. We do that through the year, and our teachers work together in teams looking at that data so that they can really intervene and impact those trends. I think Highgate's a great example of that. Highgate has done tremendous work over the past several years and are really leading in a lot of areas. I'm not just saying that because you're here.
Laura, we have any more online?
I don't believe so.
I haven't seen any questions online.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Along those same lines,
Can I have your name, please?
Karen Brown, Swanton. Along those same lines, are there national tests available that other states participate in? There are a lot of things you see online, of course are online things correct or not? But a lot of states are compared, as far as the value of the education, how educated children are, the healthcare system. There are a lot of things that are compared. And I kind of wonder if there are national tests available so that there is some kind of we can tell where the kids stand.
Yes. In Vermont, it typically scores right behind Massachusetts, near the top, in the top 5, depending on whether it's math or science or English. I think we're 4 in English language arts. And that's according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP, which is given across the country. And I think our kids are taking it this year in grades 4, 8, and 10.
Yeah.
Susan Hunter Swanton. I believe you have a really nice program here. My comment is that 18% for a tax increase is way beyond the rate of inflation. And I think anytime that it's that a lot, that it's not near the rate of inflation, that you need to think about where you can cut. Maybe parents need to start chipping in for things that are here now that we didn't have in the 60s. We didn't feed, parents fed their own children back then. I mean, that's just one example, but there's probably ways, and it's nice to go to New York City. It's fabulous if you can afford that. But it's not sustainable for a lot of people.
Thank you.
So one of my questions will go on hers is, what was the first budget proposed to the board from when the administrators get together and present it? How much has the board cut or not cut out of the budget as presented to the taxpayers?
I would say the last version of the budget that was adopted was about a $2.5 million cut from previous drafts. Because we do it in phases. We start with all of our employees and what we want to add or not add, and then we look at different factors within the budget. And then the budget gives us the board gives us guidance. And so there was a higher version of the budget that was proposed, and then the board adopted budget that was about $2 million less than that.
That was the final cut. Because I know that there's always a wish list. And I think it's important for the.
If I might speak, we do it a little differently. Peter's the chair, so he may want to speak. But we keep a list. We hear from maintenance. We hear from every school's maintenance people. We hear from Laura. We have other outside people that work with us. And we keep a list, and we work through prioritizing. But as far as cutting, I would say the facilities committee looks at every project, and we rank order them. We've got all kinds of color codes, more color codes than I've ever seen in my life. But anyway, and then we have 1-year plans up to 5-year plans, 5 to 10. Everything's prioritized, and then something happens like your roof is leaking drastically, and the patching hasn't worked the last 5 years, then that priority moves up. But I really think that the way the facility's handling it is not cutting, it's prioritizing and putting it in order for years. And a lot of this budget is facilities. If we didn't have to do our facilities, we'd be looking at a different ballgame. But
Yes, I haven't heard from you.
Nicole Draper, Town of Swanton. Sorry, that's a force of habit. One of the things that I really appreciate your presentation, one of the things that I would ask, would the glossary of terms and or all of a listing of what all said acronyms be made available to the public? I know a lot of people have a hard time, even at a local level, understanding terms and or acronyms. And I know tonight it was very informative for myself, and I think it would be very helpful to the public if
there
that
were
was
quite a
made
few in the beginning. I sat there thinking, I gotta go back to my memory banks. We had CTEs and a lot of.
And we had to learn long-term weighted average daily membership. It just rolls right off the tongue.
It sounds it.
Instead of equalized pupils wasn't long enough, right? But yes, I think that's a great suggestion. We created an FAQ document that's on our website as well, and it's on the school websites. Our PTOs asked for that.
Oh, I've read it.
And I think the glossary of terms, this video in its entirety be posted, but it's 43 minutes. So we're also gonna chop it into little bite-sized, more consumable on different areas. And so, and that glossary of terms, I can just screen grab that.
I think that would be incredibly helpful for people to have a better understanding of what your budget actually is and what it stands for. I actually sat down with a group of young people today to talk about it, and they had so many questions, and I tried to explain them the best that I could. But that's just one of those things that I think if we can start educating just the community at large, we'll be better, we'll be in a better position.
Yes, absolutely. And to, if I may, to Don's earlier point and to your point earlier, we need to advocate to the Vermont legislature that our education finance system shouldn't have a glossary of terms. It should be straightforward. We shouldn't have common level of appraisals that are driving up our taxes because of the fluctuating housing market. It's not, it should be clear. It should be equitable, which our state funding is based on, but there has to be a better way.
Kim, I haven't heard.
Kim Gates, Franklin. There was a lot of information, very good presentation, and I commend the board for all their hard work, because I'm sure it is not easy to just herd all these cats of things going on. And Devin's not here, but I don't know if you can touch on that, he mentioned because of 172, we were in this, this 1 year where benefit from us, and I don't know if that can be re-explained again.
Sure. So we used to have equalized pupils. That was an average over time, and I just say average just for expedience, don't. She'll correct me.
Yeah.
And that would go up and down, and that's really what our tax rate goes up and down. If you remember, we used to vote on a percentage increase in our spending for equalized people because the governor thought that was a great idea. All it did was confuse people. Our tax rate could be down, but we were down 2 pupils, so it looked like we were spending more. It was really very complicated. So the law passed, they did a study about how we educate students and how students are weighted. An elementary student counts as 1 student. A high school student, because they have English and science and math, always counted as more. But they did a study that recognized that students who are learning English, students who live in sparse rural communities, students that are living in poverty, all cost more to educate. And sometimes it's because we can't get teachers to come to sparse communities, things like that. So they thought about different ways that schools are funded across the country, and they created a new system of weighting. Now, some schools, the way they weighted pupils goes way back to the 80s. And some school districts that are very big and wealthy and always pass budgets and have Cadillac programming lost counts of students in this change, and we gained students in this change. At the same time, the way they count students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch, because there's universal meals now that is paid for by the education fund, people don't necessarily fill out free and reduced lunch paperwork anymore. Well, now the state directly certifies eligibility based on Medicaid eligibility. So that helped bring our numbers up to where they actually are. So in some places we went from 30% to 60% of kids being eligible. So it's a much more realistic picture of the weight of students, and that benefits our tax capacity in our community. I tried to make that simple, but it's not a simple thing. I apologize.
But we won't get that increase. That money will stay.
Right.
That's not going away, but we're not going to get that significant increase again.
It'll stay.
The long and short of it is, we get a lot more weight for, which is good. It means we get more funding, right? So we get more credit for the kids that cost more to educate, which the weighting before was not based on any data. Now it is, so it's real. Compounded with the fact that now we have, basically, we've always had free and reduced high poverty in our area, or according to state standards. Now we're actually recording all of them. And so that we had a giant jump for the weight for those kids from the 30% to 60%. So that's one of the big weighting factors is poverty. So now we not only have increased weighting for poverty, but we're actually counting all the poverty kids that we have. And so it's created this one-time sort of jump, whereas next year it's gonna level off because we'll still be getting those credits and we still have the same amount of poverty, but we won't have this big giant jump. So that's really the situation that MVSD was put in.
Yeah, Mr. Matter, I think that needs to be addressed more to the public, to educate them, and with the 18% increase, it's not so much the school, it's a legislative issue that's causing that 18%.
Just to clarify, the tax rate is not increasing 18%.
Okay.
The tax rate is increasing
our
5%.
5%, okay. So
that's our worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario, it's probably gonna be more like less than 1%.
Okay, so that, in my opinion, that needs to be distributed wider to the public to understand that the dollar, because that's what people come down to, is as hard as everybody works, it comes down to your wallet. How much you can afford to pay. So if it's a 1% or a 5% increase, that portion needs to be getting out to the public.
The hard part with that is that then the CLA hits. So the part that the school controls is that part that I just described. Then the CLA is gonna hit and they're gonna say your value of your home is $50,000 more than it was 10 minutes ago. So now we're gonna tax you on that. Yeah, but the part the school controls is that. But thank you, yeah.
Thank you. Questions? No.
I apologize, it's partly Jay's fault. He told me in high school if I had a question to ask.
I remember you coming to class.
You were a principal then. But anyways, so more understanding now that you explained that, Laura. So one of my questions was, but I'll change it. So is this more the baseline of what we're going to see in the future for school budgets? And that, because I was under the impression it was we were adding things because we knew there was a pot of money that potentially with that act.
The change in tax capacity, the board is building a budget that we hope will be sustaining us in the next several years.
Okay.
And most of that, we've said multiple times tonight, sorry, Mr. Moderator, it's the facilities that's really in there. We've moved some projects up. And leaky roofs aren't something I want to deal with, because then that leads to mold, and that leads to other things. So I think that facilities committee, and Peter chairs, we've really been aggressive. We saw an opportunity to try to get caught up. And it's not that anybody did anything wrong, but buildings are expensive.
Mr. Moderator, so mention a pool of money. There never was one. There was. I think what maybe thinking about is the Act 850 or whatever it was that took away the 5% cap that Act 127 had on it. I think there was a lot of schools that they were putting 5% cap on, so they wanted to spend more than that. And I think maybe that's the pool of money that we're thinking of, but it wasn't there. And that's why they had to get rid of the pool, because they saw that there were so many schools trying to take advantage of that to increase their spending without having to pay all of it themselves. So that was part of why the legislator had to act so quickly. But with that being taken away, and I don't want to put Laura on the spot, but I'm going to, I think we need to put that slide up there again with the yield and stuff, because like Devin had talked about worst case scenario. Well, that's gone now because they have eliminated that 5% cap. So the actual tax increase from our budget is going to be minimal. I'll let Laura talk to it, but.
We used, well, I'll jump in if it's all right, Mr. Moderator. Because the legislature was pretty volatile, every time we turned on one of those YouTube channels of House Ways and Means, which, sounds like an exciting way to spend a Tuesday afternoon, but, the presentations from the state, Joint Fiscal Office, et cetera, had a different yield in there, and we started trying to think about what number. Now, to be clear, every year in December, the treasurer sends out an estimate, and everybody uses that. Well, this year, it's been a free-for-all. So, since we stopped trying to predict what the legislature was going to do or where the yield is going to end, and in most years, it shifts by $50. We're talking $300, $400, $500 swings, right? It's a huge difference. So, and that's a huge impact on taxes across the state, those swings. So we went with the tax commissioner letter. So the yields in all of our materials, promotional materials, are $94.52, which was what the tax commissioner put. Since then, it's all closer to $10,000, which would mean our equalized tax rate might be a penny difference. And we're more likely to see a 1 cent tax rate increase. I'm not talking about CLA. 1 cent tax rate increase than a 5 cent tax rate increase in our budget. But we won't know that until the legislation finishes and all the budgets have passed and they've ended their session in May. That's when we'll really know. So we are giving you our cautious scenario instead of banking on some higher number and then it doesn't come through.
I don't know exactly which slide you were talking about, Peter.
But that $1.30 there, I'm not the one sharing, so I'm not actually pointing, but that last dot, that may very well be down at the bottom. And that's what it's looking like right today.
Yeah, and the pie chart.
The pie chart.
Where it showed what the CLA portion is gonna be and what the.
Yeah, that part of the orange part is not the part we vote on.
My brother's a lister in another part of the state. They have 2 lakes, and he's done some research at the state level. And if you're fortunate enough to have a lake in your town, or lake frontage, that's where the CLA has really, house prices have gone up. A lot of people come from out of state. And so this common level appraisal that has increased drastically on the homes that have been sold in the last 2 or 3 years, some driven by people coming in from COVID, is desirable property. And Highgate has a lake, Swanton has a lake, Franklin has a lake. Those are desirable properties for people who want to come here. And if you're selling, well, my daughter lives in Virginia, you're selling your house for $2 million, you can go up here and buy a pretty nice house in Swanton or any of Vermont for a couple $1 million. Not that people do, but a lot of, if you have friends in real estate. I know in Swanton, the houses that 4 years ago were selling for under $200,000, now they're selling for $350,000, $425,000. That drives up the common level appraisal.
That's what we're finding.
To your point, I think the one you want me to make is, if we look at these pie charts, which outline the increase that's caused by the budget, is blue. The increase that's caused by the CLA, which we were just talking about, is the orange section. So the blue section on a $100,000 house, we project right now, the numbers we're showing you that your tax bill is going to go up $62 because of the budget. It's going to go up another $104 in Highgate because of what your home is worth, because of the CLA that we just talked about. If the yield that Peter is talking about changes the way we think it's going to change versus what is in our presentation, that $62 that's being caused by the budget will go down to like $15. So if the yield goes up significantly, which we think it's going to from the 94.52 to the 97.75, the slice of that blue is going to get smaller. So that's basically do we know what's going to happen? No. 95% sure.
We'll hear about it in May when the legislature goes home.
Mm-hmm. But that's the impact that yield has.
Thank you. Any more questions out here?
Just a comment, I want to thank everyone. I want to thank everyone that came tonight. I wish someday we would have an information meeting where we had to go to the auditorium. Because now information is key. The more we know and the more we learn, the more we understand. And it makes it may be not agreeable in our wallets, but we do have to support our communities. So again, thank you to everyone here.
I forgot a list.
I was gonna say, I didn't say it was closed down, I was asking for any more questions.
Because I'm leaving.
Thanks, Jim.
Good night.
Good night. I guess, it's when the district creates a new position, does the board have final approval of if that position is going to be created or not?
Depends on what we're doing. We might change a PE teacher to a French teacher or something like that. And that's done administratively. When we add to the budget, we talk about adding positions. So we talked, for example, about alternative ed teachers, one in Swanton and one at MVU. And the principals talked about the challenges they're seeing in their school and a problem-solving strategy to build a classroom and assign some staff there, and the board supported adding those positions.
So say something, I'm just gonna make something up. director of communications or social communications.
Well,
Would
we have
that-
a communications professional in central office that the board supported my changing one position into another when there was a vacancy.
Okay, so, but it is brought, it's.
We
at
talk
board
about it.
level. Okay.
Any other questions? Sorry, you still got some on yours?
No, yeah, we can go. No, just one, I'm surprised, they won't be surprised that I asked, is, where can I find the superintendent's and business manager's wages in this presented budget? Because I asked it every year.
So
You do
central
ask it
office
every year.
fund, the central office fund starts on page 24. If you look about 3/4 of the way down under general administration,
Yeah.
I mean, these are rolled up slightly, but the 100 is the salary line. So under general administration, you'll see the salaries there and then benefits and so on. That's where the superintendent salary is. And then under fiscal services is the business side of the office. So that's myself, it's the accounts payable, the payroll specialist, my grants manager.
I assumed that was where it was, Laura, but I hate making assumptions.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Mr. Moderator, I've heard a lot about winning team, and that's great to hear. I would like to know where the board feels we're falling short and need to improve on. Because it's always great to look at what you're doing well, but it's also equally as important as to what we're, I don't want to say failing at, but what we still strongly feel needs improvement.
So the question you're asking is what are our goals to improve our lower side?
Sure.
Jill?
What is the lower side?
Yeah, I would just say that our student success committee and our board has board goals to improve retaining teachers, to improve attendance in our schools. We have goals for our academic achievement, but also that includes our students' behavioral achievement. We look at all that data as well, and how successful our kids are after they graduate. So I think the board would agree with me that those goals that they set every year are their priority areas. We're making gains, but it's not, where we want to be.
Does that answer what you were asking?
It was touched on attendance. What are some things that are tools that are being used to improve that? Because I've heard a lot over the years of attendance seems to be not as good as it once was.
I can answer that. We have a district-wide attendance team that meets every month, and then we have teams within our schools that meet to talk about attendance as well. We have a truancy and engagement professional who is basically a homeschool coordinator who works with families who are having a hard time, whether it's adolescents or younger children. That's at the higher level of families that struggle the most, but we do a lot to encourage at the teacher level, at the kid level, that we miss you, we want kids to be in school. We have a campaign in place that is helping families understand the importance of attendance as well. Strategies for anxiety. There's a lot of kids who have anxiety about coming to school, particularly since the pandemic. We have school counselors, et cetera, that are really focusing, when they're at EST and we're talking about how well a student is reading or how well they're behaving in school, we also look at attendance. So it's all levels of the system, and we really are trying to, it is improving significantly, but we still have a number of kids and families that it's a real struggle, and we want them to come to school.
You used an acronym, EST, Julie.
I'm sorry, the educational support teams. So when teachers are looking at students.
Any other questions? Keep going.
Not a question, it's just a comment that I'm going to add from what James says earlier. I think one of the things that we definitely do struggle is to educate taxpayers, educate our people. And I don't know, you guys are probably gonna have to come on the committee to create a plan to get people to come here. because I'm sure that we've all learned a lot tonight. I know I have. I know I came to the previous meeting that you had a month or so ago, and it was educational, but it clearly helps. And the more questions that are being asked by people here makes you create another question on top of a question that was asked and posed because of the answer that came out of it. We feed off each other here on this end for you guys to answer our questions. And it's truly educational. It really is. But you need people to come. Or at least listen, you know, and I wish we had more people listening from home because it would be the same education. And I just don't know how you guys can go about it because it's clear to me that you guys spend a lot of time and not only presenting this, but throughout the year to make things happen, to make a plan, to make a budget, et cetera, et cetera. My hat goes off to you guys, and thank you for all.
Yes.
I would really love to echo on that, the community education, you know, I know you're all here educating our young people, but the community at large still does need a fair deal of that education about things that are going on, and I think that creates so much confusion, and it's not just here at the school district, it's at the municipal level, it's at the state level, and you know, any additional information, you know, such as a glossary of terms, you know, some of these things are not as easy to read, you know, they're well put together, but they're not as easy to read for common folk, I guess. You know, I struggle with it sometimes, and I'd like to think that I do pretty well for myself.
Sharp lady.
You know, so. No. I'm an expat. But I encourage you all, any other ways that you can help educate the community, and as always, I'm here to support your work in any which direction.
Yeah, we keep coming up with ideas. We've been to PTO meetings, we went to the schools,
I would just invite people to check out the new budget link. Our new communications person added a ton of information.
It looks great.
Yeah. Oops, if I can get it to work.
Don, you had something about that?
I just can't leave here without saying something to the young man over here talking. The biggest challenge I see as a school director is student attendance. You look at those test scores, some of the students that took those tests have missed 10, 20, 30 days. What do you think they would do if they came to school more? And it's not the school's fault. Mr. Hartman, 30 years ago, Jeff Benet was working in this district and I was working in Georgia, Fairfax. We had a committee. It's come and gone and come and gone. But about 25 years ago, the state's attorney in this area said, I'm not wasting my time prosecuting any kids because they don't go to school. We got crime we have to deal with. And as that word got out, it got harder. The tough truancy cases got tough. Now, most students come to school about every day they can. But if you have, how many students in our district?
Over 1,800.
1,800. If you have 100 of them that miss 50 days, 40 days, it really has an impact on your test results. If there's one thing, if I could wave a magic wand, I would say every child would be in school every day unless they're really ill. But it doesn't happen. And I thought at one time, and Julie knows this because I pestered her, come on, our attendance rates got to be better. And we did a study and found out we were one of the better ones, right?
We do pretty
compared to
well.
other areas and in Vermont. I was shocked. Coming to school isn't a priority for some of us.
I like coming here.
Just two things actually. To kind of piggyback on what Don had saying, I'm a 6th grade math teacher. And it is very nice to see that the 6th grade math is doing fantastic in our district. But with attendance, I mean, we have 37 6th grade students in Highgate, and I have 10 that have missed between 10 and over 20 of our math classes already this year, and we're only in February. So when we are talking about kids not coming to school, it's not just, oh, they've missed 5 days or they've missed 6 days. These are students that are missing upwards of 20 days, and it's not just a couple. I have 10 that have missed that many out of 37. So I don't think we can express how much attendance is impacting our assessments, our scores, and we really are trying to do everything that we can to, get kids there, but it's really, really hard. Also, and then talking about attendance here as well, we have 2 small children at home, and I do know that evening meetings, whether it's a Tuesday night or a Thursday night, PTKO meetings, those all happen in the evenings, and I know that's really, really difficult. I think it also goes to show we're the only younger generation that is here right now. It's really hard for us to attend these meetings because we have to find childcare. I don't know if the board has kind of played around with the idea of having some of these meetings on a weekend, on a Saturday morning, or something like that. I feel like it would be much easier for especially younger families that have school-age children to be able to attend and be more informed. I feel very fortunate that I work in the school system, so I know a lot of what's going on, but it's hard for people that aren't able to come or work in the school system now.
Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So you talk about students missing a lot of time in your class. So what's the effect of students missing the class? I'm sure they're behind.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that affect your teaching of the students that have been there?
I spend a lot of, in Highgate we do math menu time and literacy success time, a half hour each day. That is geared towards us being able to do small group instruction to help those students that need that extra little bit. And unfortunately, I find a lot of my math menu time is catching kids up, reteaching the lesson that was there before. So it's taking away from my ability to give the kids that are there all the time that little bit extra to kind of help them improve even more. So I feel like the ones that are there, I'm not able to give that extra boost because I'm spending so much time reteaching those that are not.
That's what I was afraid of, that it's not just hurting the ones that are missing.
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Didn't schools used to get money based on attendance? I mean, is that still a thing?
It's long-term weighted average daily membership that average daily membership has an attendance component in it. So if kids aren't showing up, we don't get to count them. So that is, but it is over, Laura's gonna correct.
The ADM is only calculated in the first part of the school year, and it's only calculated if they're there for that 20 days of period of time, and if they're there for that 20 days of time, then we get the credit for the whole year, so we get the funding for the whole year for those kids. So it's not based on
throughout the year.
Johnny missing 8 days of school, we don't get paid for those 8 days of school. It's not.
But if
Doesn't
Johnny
quite work that
misses
way.
4 days
In that period of time, yes.
And usually you'll find truant students don't just go truant in the winter or spring, they have a history. And they might come for the first 2 weeks, and then they don't show up for 2 weeks. So does it directly? I hear what Laura's saying, I do feel that if your family has tendency to be truant, it does impact those initial counting periods. Now, if they came all those days and then started dropping off, it wouldn't, but I think that, I know as a landlord, that's where I'm at, that if you're truant, you tend to be truant.
Yeah, I do. Do we see, or is there any data that has truancies go up as cases of reported bullying go up?
We have data on both those things separately, but
Is there any
they're
link?
very case by case. So the numbers of students that have significant truancy challenges, there's a variety of reasons for them. But
The only reason I ask is I've heard from multiple families that their child or children do not want to go to school, and they're not going to fight with their kids to go to school because cases of bullying they feel they're not being heard on that. And I didn't know if a parent, you can take a parent's opinion for what it is, but data would show if
Right,
there's
and we look into every individual case where kids aren't coming, and we have meetings with those families and opportunities for those families to talk with administration and teachers about what their child's experiencing. Absolutely, it's important.
I don't want to indicate that they're bad people. It's just family circumstances. Sometimes kids don't come to school.
Yes.
So I know in Highgate, the numbers have grown since the start of the year. There's been a lot of new faces. What is our, if we even know it, the whole district here? How many kids have we been added throughout the whole district? 30?
Yes, about that, I mean, it comes and goes.
Yeah.
Highgate is a good example of a growing community. Swanton is a very strongly growing. When we were merging, everyone was complaining that Franklin was so small, and we've added like 30 kids over the past 5 years. So we have gone up to, again, these things are done at a point in time. I think we have 1,806 actual students right now. It was 1,770 something last year, and again, it shifts, but we're seeing stable to growing. Not huge, but with development, particularly in Highgate, I expect it to continue to grow.
Any more questions?
Go ahead.
So, I did see that there is a vacancy that on the ballot that's for Highgate that's not being ran for.
Yes, Kelly Batto has chosen not to run for that seat.
Yeah, I assume,
Put your name in.
no, I like being on this side of the table currently, but.
What about John Smith?
My only recommendation, and I don't know what the board thoughts are about how to get somebody interested, is to have some representation from a Highgate board member at the floor vote for town meeting day to speak, because that's, if they're taking the time out of their work week or day to go to town meeting day to vote, there's probably somebody that's vested and who may get some interest.
Do you vote in the gymnasium where you do Australian ballot in the gymnasium where you're not supposed to speak on school issues during the time that the Australian ballot is open at town meeting? Okay. So that leaves you on a little bit of gray area there.
Right. Yeah.
But
Even if it's just to stand and say, hey, anybody here that would be interested on the board and have vacancies,
I
please
think
contact me. And leave it at that.
maybe all right, but I'm saying is that you're speaking on the school issues, if you're voting in the gymnasium, like Franklin does,
yes,
then it's gonna create it's a very gray area that you probably wanna be careful on.
Yep.
I will tell you that as moderator.
We've been reaching out to folks and sending out messages
Yes.
on Dojo and things like that.
My other comment is thank you to the board members that aren't going to be returning for all they've done during their terms.
Thank you, Todd. Any other questions, comments? Peter?
I'd just like to thank everybody that came out tonight, everybody that was online. I'd also like to thank, everybody that did the presentation, but I'm specifically gonna point out Devin. I thought he did an excellent job of explaining everything about the budget, and especially when he talked about there's no fluff in this budget. We have things in here that are needed. We talk about the roof, we talk about the paving. There's a lot of projects that we desperately need. And I think with the changing in the legislation to H850, I think the tax from that is going to be reduced greatly. I think it's going to be minimal. But obviously our taxes are going to go up, and it's because of the CLA. We're going to see a great increase in our taxes, but from a school board and a school district, we don't have a lot that we can do to change that. Our budget isn't going to, reducing our budget isn't going to change the increase that we're all gonna see in our taxes significantly. But I hope people see the presentation. Like I said, I appreciate everybody that's here, but there's a lot of people out there. I hope that the word gets out so people will understand, and I hope people watch online. I think we've put a very strong budget together. So I just appreciate everybody's support.
Thank you. Any other comments? I would like to thank everybody for coming, and the questions were wonderful. It makes my job more fun if you can have a few questions out here. We've had a nice bunch of questions tonight, and I'd like to thank our board for all they've done. And I do like the Go Missisquoi School District. I think that's what we need. Personally, I shouldn't be. I'm supposed to be moderator, supposed to be on the neutral zone, but I do like being an alumni of the Missisquoi High School. I do like hearing we're proud of what we are and move forward, and I'd like to thank the board for doing a great job. And I'd like to ask that we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everyone.